Well, I think another thing I kind of wanted to transition to here a little bit is talking about the shooting aspect specifically and kind of talking about that because, I spent my whole life hunting and I've shot guns since I was a little kid. Well, both Kurt and I have. To speak from us and our family's big on shooting guns and everything. But, coming to this course and learning from you guys was it was super interesting because a lot of the things I felt like that you talked about and went through and discussed, they weren't overly complex.
It's the basics
thing. Yeah. They weren't overly complex things. You think it's, these, shortcuts and obviously there was a ton of things that were like that. I was like, oh, I didn't think about that or go through it. But from your standpoint and what you've learned shooting, what is something that you consider that makes someone a good shooter? Like what are some things people do that you would consider?
Well, I mean, there's a saying out there is professionals concentrate on the basics, right? So whether it's long range shooting, whether it's pistol shooting, whatever endeavor you're doing, the professionals concentrate on the basics and they get the basics down 100%. Because say you want to be a good pistol shooter, right? Well, you can't skip doing the basics and be a good pistol shooter, or you can't skip being the basics and be a good long range shooter. It's all about professionals do the basics over and over and over again until they're perfect, and then the other advanced stuff you can lay on top of that. You can add it later, or you can learn other advanced stuff later, but you always have to go back to the basics. We talked about the fundamentals of shooting, body position, breathing, all those different fundamentals. If you don't have those, then how can you add other stuff on top of that? Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah.
No, 100%. I mean, that's so applicable to archery too. I mean, it's just building those fundamentals up and doing it over and over. Like I remember, you were talking with Kurt when we were joking about like how when he jacks a shell, goes to grab grab the brass,
gun over, grab the brass.
Yeah, and you're like, don't do that.
That was the joke earlier when I said, "Did you guys collect your brass?" Because every time I'd shoot, I'd just open the bolt slowly and grab, because I'm a reloader, and he'd be like, "No, just open the bolt, let it go, like get ready for the next shot."
Yeah, but you got it. I mean, you were doing it.
I don't know if it'll stick, but I got it today.
You got to decide you're gonna make it stick.
That's the other thing too. Is like, and this applies to other things. Not just long range shooting, but people are like, well, I have the muscle memory to do it this way, and it's like, okay, yeah, you have the muscle memory to do it, maybe not the correct way, but you have that muscle memory, and all it takes is a conscious decision to do it the right way. It doesn't, people say, well, it's muscle memory, but if you make that conscious decision not to do that, then you're not going to do it. Does that make sense? Again? Yeah. Yeah. Some people use muscle memory as an excuse. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I've done it this way the whole time. Well, just stop doing it that way. Just stop.
Yeah.
Make the conscious decision to stop doing it. I don't want to say the wrong way, but not the right way,
Yeah. Yeah. And it is also, it was interesting because like, not that I expected to come in here and it'd be like, oh, there's this certain secret that every time you shoot and you do these things, but the way that you guys looked at it was everything was situational. You go through the basics, you figure out what you have to work with and make it work. Because we started out and we were shooting, after we went through the classroom stuff, we went through the med brief and the safety stuff and everything there, we go out in the flat range and, showed, well, I guess before that you guys showed us how to, set up our rifles and make sure the scope was mounted correctly and go through all these things. Then we go in the flat range and start by practicing in perfect conditions and doing that right. And, from what, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you were saying is like, you want to you want to learn to have the best case scenario as far as making sure your body was positioned right and your breathing was right, and your gun, and you understand how your gun and your ammo and everything's working correctly. And then when you have to adapt in different situations, you can make that
because I mean, in all honesty, how many hunting situations, like rifle shooting situations, are you going to be proned out on a bipod with a bag underneath, your stock, and everything's perfect? Probably never.
Yeah.
But if you still work the basics, your breathing, your trigger, maybe that will help you out if your body position, like you're in some kind of awkward position. That's the only position you can get into. So maybe your body position's not perfect, but everything else that you've been working on that's basic is still good. So you're going to make that good shot,
I'll say that, like, having shot a lot my whole life, and like I was looking for, like, trying to maybe there's one thing that's just like the secret there, but it ended up being like this culmination of things that just like improved. So everybody knows, and it's the same with archery, you're kind of timing that figure eight with when you break that trigger or when you break the release. And one thing that I know, it didn't hit me with the power line today, but it was like, just from what I've learned here, I significantly reduced the size of that figure eight to the point where it was like I'm watching my heartbeat just like move the crosshair, and you're timing on that minuscule scale, where as opposed to where it was like, say at 500 yards, it might have been 4 or 5 feet. I was reducing it down to 8-10 inches on that target, and it was like just doing that. It's like even when I did not time it correctly, it was still only a few inches or so off, but it was like the fact that you're able to get into those positions and make those small adjustments of arm position, like, hey, try this, do, because some of the stuff was a little non-standard from the traditional shooting, especially like shooting from a knee. Like, you're always told, I mean, growing up, it was always left leg up to support your support hand, but if you have something supporting the front of your rifle, like the right leg up, makes a lot more sense to support the hand that's running the back of the rifle. And it was, I don't know, but reducing that movement was, it kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Well, it was hard. It was hard. So actually, Kurt, just to correct you a little bit on the archery standpoint, it's different because in archery, you're not supposed to time anything. You kind of let it float, and as you're pulling through, it's wherever your shot breaks. So it's different because you're kind of using your back muscles to be able to help, and you're not really pulling the trigger. You're more kind of pulling through, and it just breaks surprisingly. Where, based on some of the instruction here, it was like, okay, you are kind of timing that and making sure with your breathing and having it. So it was kind of, it took me a little bit to train my mind differently with shooting with it. And there's no better feeling when you hear that hit that steel plate. Like, that's we were just joking about it at dinner or talking about it, but it's like you can't have a course like this without those steel plates when you hear that feedback. Awesome. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Is that accurate what Bo's saying? Like, in archery, I guess the phrase is accepting the pin float.
Yeah.
Who's it? Joel? Is it Joel Turner that kind of gets into that? But like, it's impossible to hold your pin perfectly still.
It's the same with. I mean, it's definitely the same with pistol shooting and shooting a carbine. It's like if you, a lot of times if you try to time it, or say you're shooting a pistol, right, and you got that little wobble or float or whatever, and all of a sudden you say now. That's what happens is push now, and you're pushing that shot, right? And same with the carbine, and same with the sniper rifle. If you consciously say now, then a lot of times you're gonna push that shot where you don't want it to go.
Yeah.
So you do accept it, but you just you do everything to minimize that movement that's going on.